Special. So Andrew Miller is going to be talking to us about his business, business enjoyment, because he believes if you're in business, you should be enjoying every single day. And I certainly can't argue with that. So I'm going to hand over to him now and him to tell us what he's going to teach us.
Excellent. Well, I'm actually hoping that you're going to teach me some stuff because I'm going to get you to do some work fairly shortly. I'm going to do a little bit of introduction, a bit of waffle about me for those that have not met me before, set the context, and then I'm going to set you off exploring something so that you can feed back at the end. So the genii, is that, or is it geniuses? Can never remember. It's you lot. We're going to be tapping into your brain skills and so you can see what you can bring forth. So just a little bit of introduction for those that don't know me. Let's get some blank screens up. Everyone can see that all right? We're all good? So that's me, Andrew Miller. And I am, as mentioned by Jill, I'm the founder of Business Enjoyment. And Business Enjoyment is a format that a brand that's been going since about 2017, so it's about 8 years old. But I've been a qualified coach and working as myself as a coach in the coaching space, business and personal, since 2011. So I've been around for a while, you know. And just to sort of blow my own trumpet for a bit and give a few hints of what I've done in that time, I have done a TEDx talk, and I will be alluding to that earlier on, and we'll actually be setting some stuff up we're going to do. So more about that later. Fairly early on in my career, I wrote a book, which again will actually feature a little bit, but essentially it was a self-help book for business owners going through insolvency or financial difficulty. During the COVID era, it's sort of when financial crisis kicked in, it's sort of its importance surged again. So I was actually lucky enough for Business Game Changer magazine to call it one of the top 3 books of 2020. Only 8 years after I'd written it, but hey, I'll take any accolade when it comes along. Thank you very much. But in that time, I have written 1 or 2 other books as well, just to, you know, keep myself occupied in one way, shape, or form, all on Amazon. But that's sort of the past. What's going on for me right now? Well, one of the things that Jill's already alluded to in the present is that we do have other meetings like this, which are at a different time, along with Nikki, who's in the call as well. We host a slightly different version of this. Say it's the same spirit, but we do things slightly differently. And for the record, the next one of those is on the 14th of November, and that's at 8:30 a.m. UK time. So that's the critical. It's in the morning rather than the afternoon for the UK, and gives us access to other parts of the world. The other things I do is I run these things called breathing spaces, which are discussion groups where people explore their own businesses, their personal learning developments, their business learning developments, are all mapped around the business enjoyment model that I've adapted. And they're by invite only, actually. But if anybody's intrigued to know how they get an invite, then by all means, have a chat with me. And the other thing I do is these things called the Business Bliss Forum. These are free, and they're every Thursday evening. The next one is this Thursday, the 31st of October at 5:30. And a mix of different things that we explore in terms of making business easier. The next one's all about, it's titled Let the Right One In. So how to only work with lovely people. So that's a really quick overview. But I want to talk to you about business enjoyment a little bit more and the key message behind it. And to do that, I will also give you a little bit of my background. Let me just stop sharing so I can see you in full glory. And as mentioned, if I'm going to stick a link in the chat, I would ask you to save this, but don't start watching it now. But this is a link to that TEDx talk that I was alluding to. It sort of underscores the principles of what I believe and how I understand things to be. And you can click on that link and either go straight to and just watch the TED Talk that's on YouTube, or if you want to get a free copy of the accompanying book, then absolutely do download that as well. Absolutely fine. But I do recommend that you have a look at that after today's session because it will just fill in some of the blocks for context. But I'm going to give you a few of the key bits of that talk in a minute, just so we can lead into the next bit. And bottom line of it is that my key issue is that in our society, certainly in the business sense of society, but also in personal sense, the concept of success is still based around one thing, and that's money. So in business terms, everyone's talking about turnover, profits, the value of the business. There might be different terms, but ultimately it comes down to money at the end of the day. And I think everybody here knows that individually, that's not how we measure success. It's a factor, but it's only part of it. We have so many other things going on. And so when we're in a situation where we measure things one way, but society measures things another way, we end up in conflict. And the consequence of that conflict often leads to stress within ourselves. Plus, money being the individual measure is not actually a great thing either. A little bit more on that later. But the question is what can we do instead? And actually, that is what we're going to be exploring later on in your groups. But more on that later. First of all, a little bit more about me. It's worth knowing my background to understand where I came from. And again, this feeds into the sort of the key points in the TED Talk. So I used to work for a company called KPMG, which many may have heard of. I worked there for nearly 17 years. They are a firm of accountants and consultants. My speciality was I was an insolvency practitioner. And for those that don't know anything about insolvency practitioner, my job was basically when a company went bust, my job was to go in and take ownership of that business and run it. So that's what I did for 17 years, was running businesses. And they were extreme and they were stressful situations as well. So I had to deal with all what was going on there. But I got involved in every single area. And from my point of view, what it meant was that I didn't need to be an expert in every industry, because I worked in everything you can imagine. I've done bakeries and dog food and oil rigs and all sorts. I can't be an expert in all the industries, but what you do is you work with the existing team. You set an overall goal, which is normally to save the company and make as much money as, retain as much value as possible, and let things run as normal, but challenge the established order, because that's where all the problems arose. Which, when you think about it, are actually great skills for coaching, as well as, of course, getting a lot of business experience. Now, one of the key things I learned in this process, when you're working with business owners who are losing everything that they've created, then you realize the emotional connection that there is between people and their businesses. And again, we kind of know it inherently, but it's sometimes forgotten when people talk about business as a process going forward. So that's one of the key things I learned, is that emotional connection. It's so stark when you see people losing stuff. But as mentioned, KPMG, great experiences. I worked all around the UK. I worked in Europe. I worked in Australia. I worked in the Far East. Never any regrets of working for them. But ultimately, I came to realize that I wasn't actually enjoying what I did. There were bits that were great. There were some amazing bits. There were some bits that I genuinely hated. The majority of it, I kind of just tolerated. And I think that's something a lot of people recognize. And this is not a reflection on the firm or the industry. It's just that I realized I wasn't where I ought to be. And once this realization came over me, I would speak to other people and as mentioned, very few people actually enjoy their job. And that's one thing. The other thing is nobody expects to enjoy their job. So just think about that for a moment. Think what kind of society creates an environment where actually looking forward to going to work is considered to be rare and unusual. Having got into leadership and coaching whilst at KPMG, I retrained, as mentioned, with the Coaching Academy, and as I say, left to set up my own business. And I had an initial niche, which was working with business owners going through insolvency. That's why I wrote the first book, to help them in that situation. But it meant that I got into dealing with much more personal issues and the confidence, the mindsets, beliefs, the patterns that people run, and all that kind of thing. And but as things developed, that didn't really work out as well. Actually, it worked out maybe too well. I was asked by the government to be advisor and start creating this thing, but it was actually bigger than I was actually able to do. So I was struggling, and as I was struggling, I was getting stressed as well. So whilst I was hitting certain success things, it wasn't necessarily traditional success, and I found that and hopefully most people, well, hopefully, but most people will have experienced this as well. But when you work for yourself, suddenly a whole load of hidden fears come out that have been protected by the corporate environment, because now there's nowhere to hide. So it's just you. So all this stuff comes up. So as well as working on the business, I now have to start working on my own mindsets and my fears. Rejection was my big one, by the way. And if you think about it, if I was scared of rejection, bearing in mind what my job was, which was essentially the corporate equivalent of the Grim Reaper, yeah, that didn't really tap into the sort of the thing that I was aligned to. You can see why it wasn't fit for me. But so now I'm working with all sorts of businesses, generally small business owners, but definitely not just those in financial difficulty, people that are doing okay. But it was clear that most people were struggling mentally, or with mental health and all that kind of thing, stress and all that sort of stuff. And indeed, there was a NatWest Bank survey of small business owners. We showed that majority of small business owners believe their business has a negative impact on their mental health. And when I told people this, again, very few people found it surprising, which just makes you beg the question: is what kind of society creates an expectation that when you go out and follow your dreams, that it's probably going to damage you? What do you think? Now I know well from my background that the things when you do this stuff, it doesn't always work out very well. My insolvency tells me that some stuff doesn't work, and this bit is not part of the TED Talk, by the way, but it's very relevant to the situation, and it's about someone I know who went through an insolvency. His business went bust. He went personally bankrupt as well, and the stress of going through all of that actually caused him to have a stroke. That's how serious it was. And I know everyone's here a caring person, so you'll think, oh, that's horrible. There's always a little bit of the brain, or there are some people that think, well, business isn't for everybody. If you're not really geared up for stress, then don't go into business. Find something else to do. And that's the interesting thing about this story, is that this guy's not just somebody that just sort of turned up and gave it a go at some point. This guy was ex-special forces. He was used to fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he was fine with that. But a business going bust nearly made him die. So we have a society where those that fail are actually put under a level of stress that is greater than being in a war zone. Now, flip all of that, I'm also meeting people who'd actually made it, were incredibly successful. And guess what? They weren't happy either. And in some cases, clinically so. So we've got a society that, for those people who actually achieve success, can still end up being miserable and depressed. And this led me to my other big realization, is that actually there's no correlation between business success and personal happiness. And when you think about it, that is crazy. So that even when we get everything that we're searching for, we're still not happy, we're still not complete. You combine that with the emotional connection that exists between entrepreneurs and their businesses, and from there, that's where the concept of sort of business enjoyment was born. You are in control of your business, so if you're not absolutely unquestionably enjoying it, then do something about it. But the other factor in all this is that most of the problems are caused because we only have that one measure of success in business. It's how much money we make, that's it. And on one side, when you have that one single focus, then corners are cut and inappropriate decisions are frequently made. Just look at the water companies in the UK at the moment, a classic example. Just makes no sense. And then again, as individuals, we all inherently know that success is about more than money, but because it's the only measure that's around, we don't get that personal satisfaction even when things are going well. Or we may not. Sometimes we can, but we're at risk. Now, there are plenty of things that we can do on ourselves, and there's people in this room here that can do a lot on this, but to reduce or even remove feelings of stress in these situations so that we can cope. We can cope with the world in a more positive way. And that's important, but wouldn't it also be a good idea to actually align ourselves with what we want to achieve? And that's my thing. It's why not come up with a new measure of success? one that we can all get behind and that won't naturally create stress. And that is what we're going to explore today. So I have an alternative. It is early days. This is for people to explore, inspect, test it out. We can make it more or better later. So I will give you my alternative. It's going to be high level concept. Then we'll break into breakout rooms. As I said, Alan, 3 or 4 people in each room, just have a nice tight conversation. And I'm going to allow you to explore that framework. Now, I do have some specific questions for you to consider, which I'll stick in the chat in a minute. Then we have 4 high-level elements that will overlap. And I'll tell you, I'll put some slides up again in a minute, just so you've got them. I'll send them in the chat as well. And I'll tell you the sort of things that we might expect to find in there. But I want you to sort of pull together what's important to see how they fit with you and explore. What I will ask is, can one person take some notes in your group and feedback some of the things that might be included? So let me start by sharing my screen again, wherever it's gone. There we are. And let me run through my 4 different. So normally we have one measure of success. We've got 4 here, and I'll run through them each in turn. So feel free to make a note, scribble things down, whatever you want to do. So I'm going to run through the 4 things, then I'll run through a bit more detail, the sort of things we might see in there. So first off, quantity. Second, quality. Third, trust. And 4th, good. Quantity, quality, trust, and good. So let me explain a little bit more. Quantity, that's kind of what we have already. That's what we sort of, this is the existing sort of thing. And remember, we're talking about business, we're not talking about personal. This needs to be something that is accepted, like accountants can do accounts around and all this sort of stuff. So these might be quite not words you associate with, but it's got to get into the corporate structure here. So this would be like your turnover, your profit, asset value, how many sites we've got, how many employees we've got, all this sort of stuff could fit into the quantity kind of thing. But the standard sort of expectation, so volume. Then we have quality. Now, again, we've got an overlap here. So if you've got quality products, then the price is going to be higher. So I understand how the whole economics works, but it's as well as the product. We also want to be thinking about the working environment. Is it quality place? Maybe the systems and processes as well. I have a question mark there because you might argue that fits in a different category. But again, these things can overlap. So quality can go across the board, but there'll be other things as well. It's just sort of an idea. Which we can get onto trust. And if you think about some companies that certainly a lot of the companies that started off in the sort of .com era, and arguably even Amazon, they started off not making any money. The whole thing was built on trust, and they actually became profitable later on once the trust had been built. So trust is quite phenomenal. But we've got the trust that the customers have with the company, that the employees have with their employer, that the suppliers, that they're going to get paid on time, they're going to get good prices, all that kind of thing, and of course the community as a whole. Sometimes it's how do we perceive that company or us? Is there trust in place? And then finally, good. Is this company actually making the world a better place, or at least do no harm at the absolute minimum? Is the workforce actually looked after? We can talk about sweatshops in China and all that kind of thing. Is there actually sort of quality work for good force? What about the supply chain? Everybody involved. It's all very well us being whiter than white, but what if our something we're getting is coming from a toxic waste dump in South Africa or something? Whatever. How are we impacting on the global community and the environment and things like that? What about ourselves? Are we damaging ourselves? I think that's it for that. Let me stop the share. So, well, I was going to go with goals. We've got the questions up next, wasn't it? Never mind. We'll come to that in a minute. So, those are just some ideas. What I want you to think about is what could be included in each of those categories. What would you measure in your business? And are we missing anything? I'm going to just stick this in the chat. Whee! So I've not been able to chance to look at anything any comments have made. Everybody should have that, and they should stay in the room as well. So just seeing a message, Jennifer. I'll get to it. But yeah, so what could be included in each category? What could you measure in your business? And are we missing anything? Now, key warning, do not allow the how to stop the what. So if you're thinking up something, oh, we could include this, we could do that. This is important to me. I want to include that. And then someone comes up with, oh, well, you'll never be able to measure that. How could you do that? How could you do? What? No, forget that. This is white hat thinking. Let's just go wherever we don't know what the life will bring in the future. Something like that appears impossible now might become possible in the future. So it's the ideas of what gets included at this stage. Later on, we can refine it and also change the terminology, whatever. But it's trying to get some ideas from you guys in terms of, with your own experience of your own business and what's important to you and what's important to you in your business, with your own experience of working in other companies, what would fit into those sort of things. So I've lost track of that. So I think we got 15, 20 minutes, I think, in the rooms and then come back. Is that about right? So Alan, if you've got any questions, hopefully that's, I mean, it's a fairly free kind of thing. But if anyone has any questions they don't understand, they need some clarification on anything, ask it now. Otherwise, you're going into the room to start exploring. And the questions in the chat, so it should come through to the thing for you.